We always enjoy getting the breakdown from Steve Merrill each and every Thursday here at the Voice of College Football. So not just this segment here, but if you check out all the team channels, you see Steve's the segments that he provides us with information on all the big college football games every weekend. And you can join, of course, Steve on our Patreon, where he gives his under the radar selection, and at wagertalk.com. All right, Steve, if we just watched football for the last couple of weekends and forgot the brands, you would think Kansas should be the favorite against Oklahoma. But, of course, the Sooners are still a 9-point favorite at home against the Jayhawks, but this team has been reeling.
Yeah, I mean, this is such an example of how you have to look at current form. The big question as a handicapper is how much do you discount or weigh in current form? And I think a lot of times you can find value based on misleading results. But what's the old saying? Once is an accident, two is whatever, three is a trend. And, I mean, Alabama's now off of 3 losses in a row. And it's the way they're losing the games, Mark, which would be very concerning to me. This is a team that had national title hopes, as they do every season when the year began. I'm not going to say it was a bad loss against Kansas State, because myself, along with a lot of experts, felt like Kansas State was underrated this year. They still, though, lost as a 2-touchdown favorite a few weeks ago at home. But they weren't out of it with just one loss. Back in the day, they would have been, not with the current format. But the TCU loss obviously knocked out any hopes of national title, not just because they lost the game, but they got routed. They lost outright 55-24 as a 5-point road favorite. And what was concerning to me in that game, not only did I think it was a decent spot for Oklahoma to bounce back, which they obviously didn't, but halfway through that game, they'd given up 4 touchdowns of 62 yards or longer to TCU. So that's a sign that either, first of all, they just don't care, or they honestly have some serious defensive problems, or probably a combination of both. Then what happens last week, a huge rival series, used to be the shootouts, now called the showdown. It definitely wasn't a shootout last week, as they get skunked 49-0 against Texas. So now you're asking them to lay over a touchdown, obviously a difficult spot. Now, using the math model for the entire season would favor Oklahoma by about 9.5 points here in my power ratings. So, the line is pretty much where it should be. With that said, though, the current form, I think you definitely discounted a bit. Now, public looks like the public is extremely heavy on Kansas. I don't talk a lot about public consensus here on the college analysis. It's something I use heavy in the NFL. People that check out wagertalk.com, WagerTalk TV, you'll see my NFL Fade the Public video every weekend, and it's done extremely well, fading the most public sides. One thing I point out in that video is the public's normally on favorites. But when you see them on underdogs, especially high-profile games, and college games sometimes qualify, it's a red flag, and Kansas looks like a huge public underdog getting more than a touchdown here. So this is one of those hold your nose and pull the trigger with Oklahoma if you dare do it. Not sure I'm ready to do it, though. One thing I will point out is that Oklahoma defense has been really bad, as I mentioned. Kansas is explosive offensively, but they're very mediocre on defense. So I actually like the over in this game. And surprisingly, the over-under has dropped from an opener of 65 down to 62. I think if you're going to play this game, play the over, because it's a little bit of a flat spot for Kansas as well after that back-and-forth 38-31 loss to TCU last week. Maybe the over is the safest play in this one.
It's all Steve's work at wagertalk.com. That's, again, wagertalk.com. And Steve is kind enough to give us an under-the-radar selection each week. 5-1 against the spread this season is Steve. That's on Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV, and follow us right there. You get the Discord link, which means you can talk college football 24/7, 365. Steve, thanks so much.
Thanks, Mark.